Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Azure On Air podcast. Today, we're at the Integrate Summit, and I've managed to grab Mike Budzynski from the API Management team. And Mike, you and I chatted last year, didn't we? We had a really good conversation. So thank you for coming back on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So just for the audience, tell me what's cool in the API management world since we caught up last year.
Yeah, lots of things. I'm afraid we won't have enough time to cover all of that. But we've been innovating a lot across several different areas. One of them being, of course, AI, and I believe some of my colleagues already talked about it. A lot of AI gateway capabilities to help you mediate AI APIs, whether these are, Azure OpenAI or AI Foundry APIs, or perhaps even custom LLMs deployed somewhere, let's say even on premises. So that's number one. Then we also embrace AI for productivity gains for our customers and users. Things like Copilot for policies. So in API Management, you have the concept of runtime policies to mediate API calls, requests, and responses. And now you can just pull up Copilot and ask it to write policy code for you based on your requirements from a natural language prompt. Or not even that, you can also ask it to explain policy that someone else wrote, maybe your colleague that had already left the company. You can also use it to optimize, troubleshoot policies, etc. So that's very powerful. We also have integrations with GitHub Copilot in Visual Studio Code through our extensions, and that allows you to also use it for policies as well as API design and implementation.
Do you think with the Copilot, people will move away from the designer aspect of the policy and just straight in the code with Copilot doing it for them?
I think what we'll see is more less coding per se, but more thinking and analyzing and just making sure you understand your own requirements and you phrase them. But the coding can be done definitely by AI. And the third area of AI that we're also embracing is MCP. So we are allowing our customers to publish their APIs as MCP servers for consumptions by various agents. As well as Azure also has MCP server for control planes, so you can also have agents managing your API management services and APIs through with AI through MCP. So that's AI, but we are also doing a lot of stuff on other fronts. So it's not only AI for us.
So which is the bit you're specializing on the team, because it's quite a big team now.
Correct. Yes, it changes throughout time. I kind of like to work on where I'm needed, but one of the areas I work on a lot is called Federated API Management. So what it means is that you can think of the federal government and state governments, especially in the US. Federated API Management is kind of similar, where you have the platform team that owns the API management platform in their organization. They want the API development teams, API teams to publish and maintain and succeed with their own APIs. But they also want to impose certain rules and policies and governance and some oversight, making sure that those APIs meet quality criteria, security criteria, maybe privacy compliance, that they have insights into monitoring across the board for the whole API portfolio, and that the platform is ready to onboard all these teams inside the organization. So that's what we call the Federated API Management, where you have that central team with some governance aspects and the API teams who develop and manage their own APIs with a lot of autonomy to control their APIs and their lifecycle. So one of the key concepts to enable federated API management is workspaces in Azure API Management. Workspaces are sort of like folders from the control plane perspective, where you can manage your APIs in those folders. And then you assign a certain group of people permission to that workspace, right? So you have workspace for one team, workspace for another team, and so on. But then each workspace is associated with a workspace gateway. So what that means is that you can actually mix and match, which APIs are deployed or which workspaces are deployed to which gateways. For mission critical workloads, you can say that I want only one workspace to be deployed on that gateway to fully isolate it from noisy neighbor issues, to make sure that it's the most reliable, the most secure possible, right? To have those mission critical APIs fully isolated from any faults caused by other workspaces. If you want to optimize cost for other workloads, you can associate up to 30 workspaces with a shared workspace gateway. And that, of course, brings the cost down, but then you have more APIs running on that gateway. And some resources like CPU and memory are shared across all the workspaces. So there might be some noisy neighbor issues arising. So that's one. And then, the third part to workspaces are the platform team controls. So how do we serve that platform team to make it easier to govern those APIs in the organization? So one aspect of that is the runtime policy. You can apply a runtime policy that spans, all workspaces or conditioning on a workspace that cannot be overridden by a workspace team. It's like enforcement of runtime behavior. Another thing is federated logging. Federated logging enables API teams to have visibility into their own workspace logs only, but the platform team has visibility to all the logs for all the APIs in the platform. Similarly, developer portal is also centralized. So developer portal surfaces all the APIs across all workspaces for discovery. You can still control the visibility of those APIs, but you can create a centralized catalog to discover the APIs.
Right, got you. So Mike, quick question for you then. So workspaces versus API Center. Just give me your take on what the differences between those two are, because I guess Correct. It feels like they kind of overlap a few.
Yeah, that's a great question. So when we talk about federated API management, we actually talk about three key Azure services. One of them is API management with, first and foremost, workspaces that enable that federation. The second service is API Center. API Center allows you to create a federated API inventory for all APIs across all lifecycle stages, types, deployment platforms, API management platforms. So if you have, let's say, some APIs on Azure, some APIs on AWS, RPG, MuleSoft, whatever, you can centralize that inventory in API Center for the purpose of governance and for the purpose of API discovery by developers. And API Center actually synchronizes your API inventory from API management services automatically. You can have that synchronization in place. We also have the synchronization for AWS API gateway. So now you can also synchronize your AWS APIs. And API Center does not have the runtime component. So it doesn't have the enforcement of policies, it doesn't have the logging.
Right.
But it does provide you with that federated API inventory.
So it's very much more like in the data world, it's like what Purview was trying to solve is the catalog in a way.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then you can also assign metadata to your APIs to better manage that inventory of APIs. And we also have API design compliance. So you can define a rule sets for API design, and you can check which APIs conform to those API design criteria, and you can also enforce that. So that's very powerful. And we also shift that left with Visual Studio Code integration, where you can have that linting applied as developers are creating and building those APIs, not post factum, right? So again, productivity gains because you don't need to go back and forth. You design your APIs with certain criteria in mind as you work on these APIs.
Got you. So what are the things that really excite you the most about the bits you've worked on or you've announced at Integrate this week?
I think there's plenty of exciting things honestly in the API management space. I've been on this product for probably around, I don't even remember, 5-6 years maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe even longer. And I think just because APIs are so critical, is the communication protocol. So no matter what new technology pops up, I feel like APIs are there, and you can already see that with AI. That's why we are adding a lot of AI capabilities. And I feel like, it's going to also change a bit, right? Because now AI will produce APIs, it will consume APIs, right? And that's sort of like the world that we haven't known, right? It's not like it was 5-10 years ago. So I think that's a pretty exciting change. Now the question is, how do we adapt to it and where it's going to go? No one really knows. Some people have ideas, concepts, but no one knows for sure. So I think that's exciting. And then also, like I say, a lot of that evolution to federated API management organizations, trying to make it more productive and also make it more secure and higher quality. With some governance aspects, I think that's also very interesting.
Yeah, that sounds cool. What about so on I think last year we talked a lot about Defender and how that was fitting into the ecosystem. So what's the key things you're feeling these days about some of the security aspects of API management? How are you guys keeping us safe and making sure we're building secure APIs?
Right. So Defender for APIs is a plan of Microsoft Defender for Cloud. First and foremost, it provides threat detection. So it is powered by machine learning models for various different attack paths vectors. And those machine learning models analyze your traffic and try to discover the attacks in near real time. So that has already been in there for like maybe a couple of years or a year. Very powerful functionality. But they also have the inventory part where they invent all of their APIs for security analysis, and they also analyze the configuration posture. They detect which APIs don't have authentication in place, which APIs are publicly exposed outside the organization, which APIs serve sensitive data, etc. Right? So that allows you to better understand your API portfolio from the security standpoint. And they also added several new features. Now that inventory part is also part of Defender CSPM offering. So if you already have Defender CSPM enabled in your organization, you get that API security posture analysis as part of that offering, which is amazing. It doesn't include that threat detection for runtime, but it does include those security posture bits and pieces. The second thing we added is mapping of API-led attack paths. So you can map APIs to backend services to understand that if an API gets breached, which backend services are affected. And that helps, of course, with understanding, but also prioritization of remediation of issues, right? Extremely powerful. And we're just working on also bringing that, security configuration posture analysis and detection of APIs that are not managed, because historically Defender has been integrated with Azure API Management for covering those APIs. But now we'll be able to detect APIs in various app services, including web apps, function apps, and logic apps.
Right.
And then let you know, look, these are the APIs that are not managed. Here's what we think about those APIs. And possibly, maybe you want to decide to manage these APIs.
So just so I kind of understood that correctly, we're thinking about things like if I've got a function app with a function, somebody's calling it directly, not through API management, but Defender will help spot that I've got a vulnerability point here and kind of say, right, let's maybe think about API management so we centralize the security and the governance on top. And
Correct.
That's really cool. So how do you guys... how did you guys go about thinking about implementing that kind of idea? Because that's pretty powerful, and I could imagine it's really complex if you think about all the different scenarios.
So it's been something we've been looking into for the past few years. We know the shadow API discovery or unmanaged APIs are a huge threat, probably even more so than managed APIs, because they might be abandoned. You don't know who uses them sometimes. You don't have that observability piece that API gateways provide. So we've been trying to wrap our head around it for quite a bit of time, and now we are excited to come up with that new functionality.
I love that term, shadow API. I bet people are probably frightened when they realize how much of that they never knew they had. So
exactly. Really cool. And abandoned APIs have been there for like 15 years, forgotten, and now you learn, okay, they might be breached. And very often those legacy APIs, they serve some important aspect of functionality.
So is that, Mike, I think we're kind of coming up to the end of the podcast. Is there any last bits you'd like to share with anybody at all from your side?
Well, one last thing about that federated API management. So I did mention there are 3 Azure services that enable that: API management, API center, and we are also looking at Azure policy for that use case. So Azure policy allows you to enforce or audit configuration of your services or APIs at a mass scale, right? So you can, for example, ensure that all the APIs use secure protocols. You can also, create your custom policies. For example, limit the number of API versions per API to make sure that your inventory doesn't explode. So you can use that for federated API management. Aside from that, like I said, I think we are at a very interesting time in history. So the APIs are critical more than ever, I would say, with the rise of AI and also the rise of other aspects. So I highly encourage everyone to take a look at API management, see which functionalities work for you, and to give it a try.
So I think, because I think over the last couple of years, we've obviously had the new SKUs came out, which
we have that
been
too.
Going really well. Is there any changes that you guys have planned around that?
We just announced Premium V2 preview a couple of weeks ago at Build.
So is that following on from the standard
right?
V2,
Standard
which-
V2 and basic V2 became generally available
Yeah.
this spring last year, I think April or May. We just announced Premium V2. So that's new infrastructure, built for modern world. Great piece of functionality. And also, I forgot to mention, in September last year, we celebrated 10th anniversary of API Management GA.
But I remember when it used to be, was it Apiary?
It was
Yeah.
Epiphany. It was acquired by Microsoft.
Yeah.
I think it launched in preview in 2014 spring, and then GA
quite a
September 2014. So it's been 10 years, and we've grown so much. It's incredible.
Did you guys have a good party when it was the 10-year anniversary?
We had a cake. We had a celebratory cake.
I think that's a huge congratulations for the team.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us, Mike, on the podcast today.
Thank
and
you,
I hope
Mike.
you have a really good rest of the event.
Thank you.